Hey guys, how you doing? It's been a minute since I have popped on here to talk to you about anything. But I want to talk to you today, something concerning. And it might not be concerning to a lot of people, but it basically is concerning to enough people to get out and hinder law enforcement from doing their job and things of that sort. So, and it's mainly about immigration, illegal immigrants, and how we, as the people of this country, should be treating the people who have been allowed to come in here. And they have not been vetted, they have not been, they're not legally here. But how should we treat them? So, the world has a way that we're supposed to treat them, but God has a way that we're supposed to treat them too. How about that? Did you know that? So what I did, for those who are interested in knowing, is God's view on the ethical treatment and protection of those who we have allowed into this country illegally, that is. But how should we treat them? So the relationship between, let's go back to the children of Israel. Let's scratch that. Let's go back to the children of Israel. So the relationship between the children of Israel and foreigners was governed by a complex set of laws. So they had a set of laws on how to do this. We just winging it. We just playing it by ear. We just winging it. We don't have no set of laws on how this should be done. Well, let me take that back. We actually have a set of laws on how this should be done. They just ignored them. And I'm talking about governmental officials and not the people, because our elected officials are the ones who are supposed to be upholding the law, and they didn't. So anyhow, these instructions generally fell into two categories: protective inclusion for those living among them, and strict separation from the religious practices of the neighboring nations. So let's start with the ethical treatment and protection. The Torah contains frequent commands to treat foreigners with empathy and justice. This was often rooted in Israel's own history as outsiders. So the children of Israel were held captive in Egypt and other nations, and because they was held captive, they had an understanding of what it felt to be in bondage. How about born again believers have an understanding of how it feels to be in bondage also, because they were held captive by the enemy of their soul? But that's another teaching. Empathy through experience. You shall not oppress a foreigner. You know the heart of a foreigner, for you were a foreigner in the land of Egypt. That was Exodus 23:9. Legal equality. Generally, the stranger was to be treated the same as the native born under the law. You shall have one law for the stranger and for the native. So there's one law that governs both the native to the land and the stranger. Leviticus 24:22. Provision for the poor. Foreigners were given gleaning rights. So if you had a field and you grew corn, you did not harvest on the outside of the rim, your field. You left that for the foreigners to glean or to have. They could harvest there. They could take that part that you have left for them. So you left provision for food so they can eat. So Leviticus 19:10, it says, foreigners were given gleaning rights, meaning farmers were forbidden from harvesting the corners of their field or picking up dropped grain so that the poor and the foreigner could eat. Leviticus 19:10. Love as a command. Most notably, the command to love others was extended to the foreigner. The stranger who dwells among you shall be to you as one born among you, and you shall love him as yourself. Leviticus 19:34. There were boundaries that were set, religious boundaries and inclusions. It went like this. While foreigners were welcome, their participation in Israel's religious life had specific requirements. So they had requirements. They didn't say that they couldn't, but they had requirements. And that was because most of the foreigners, like the foreigners here, worshiped other gods. So the Sabbath. Foreigners living in Israel gates were required to rest on the Sabbath. They had to do as the people of the land did, ensuring they were not exploited for labor while the Israelites rested. Exodus 20:10. So if you lived in a land with the Israelites, if they rested on the Sabbath, you rested on the Sabbath also, so you wouldn't be used, taken advantage of by the people. The Passover. A foreigner could only eat the Passover meal if they had the males in their household were circumcised, signaling a full entry into the covenant. In other words, you made their God your God also. You came in covenant with the God of Israel. And there's plenty of examples of that, and I'm going to give you some examples of that further down. Sacrifices. Oh, the Passover. That was Exodus 12:48. Sacrifices. Foreigners were allowed to bring offerings to the tabernacle or temple, provided they followed the same sacrificial procedures as the Israelites. That was Numbers 15:14 through 16. In other words, it goes back. However the children of Israel gave their sacrifices, however it was that they did it, they had to come into agreement and do it the same way. Their God, the Israelites' God, became the foreigners' God. They didn't serve no other God. Prohibition and separation. To preserve the religious purity of the nation, God ensured strict warnings regarding relationships with the Pacific 7 nations of Canaan and other neighboring groups. So let's look into that and see what that was. Intermarriage. Marriage was the surrounding pagan nations was strictly forbidden. Deuteronomy 7:3-4. And it was a reason for that. God wasn't just being, no, we ain't going to do that. No, the concern was not ethics, but spiritual. For they will turn away your sons from following me. And not just the sons, the daughters too. So they couldn't give their sons or their daughters to the foreigners in the adjoining land. Not the ones that was in there. Because the ones that were in there, they made the God of Israel their God. They came into covenant. They came into agreement. No covenants. Israel was commanded not to make political or religious treaties with the inhabitants of the land they were entering, as it would be a snare. Exodus 23:32. Avoidance of customs. They were warned not to learn the detestable ways of the foreigners, such as child sacrifice, abortion, sorcery, witchcraft, idolatry, worship, Divine 9, Deuteronomy 18:9-12. So, what does all of that look like? We'll jump forward to the New Testament. So, Jesus instructed them on how to take care of orphans and widows and those that was in the land. Now, I want you to understand that this was not given to the Roman government. This was given to the people. So, Old Testament, New Testament, this was talking to the people of that land, not the responsibility of the government. So we got it twisted. We think it's the responsibility of the government, and what our governments have done, local, state, national, what a lot of them have done is made provisions for foreigners which took away from the people. They weren't supposed to take away from their people. The people are the ones that were supposed to take on this responsibility. And how do we know that? Well, Jesus told them that if Jesus taught caring for the least of these, the hungry, thirsty, naked, sick, and in prison, is equal to serving him directly. He told me, he said, when you've done this to the least of them, you have done this to me. So he told them to love your neighbor as yourself. He told the people. He didn't tell the government. He told the people to love your neighbor as yourself. That means if a foreigner come in this land and it is the people's responsibility to take these people in. I see all this protest and all this crazy stuff, but if you ask one, well, can you take one of them into your home? They're going to look at you like you just bumped your head. They're going to think you talking to Boo-Boo the Fool. Yes, they are. Because they want the government to deplete its resources when it is supposed to be the people who use their resources to care for those that are in need. That's why you have organizations that should not be funded by the government taking care of people who are in need. These are responsibilities that those who are born again, those who have humbled themselves and called on the name of the Lord, those who say that they are Christians, these are things that they should be doing. They should be taught to do it. It's right there in the Word. Believers are told to be open-handed toward the poor and share food and clothing with those who have none. Let's share your resources. Hospitality. Practice hospitality towards both fellow believers and strangers. Personal gifts. Every person is expected to use their unique talents and gifts to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace. Not the government. It is not the government's responsibility to take care of people who come into this land. Now, what the government's responsibility is to ensure that we're not having criminals come here. We're not, they're supposed to look into their background. They're supposed to find out what kind of people they're letting into this land. This is what the government responsibility is. It is not like, what's his name, Brandon Johnson up there in Chicago gave all the resources, the people money, and then he's taxing them more further because he done spent their money on frivolous things and people who have not really been vetted to come into this country. And if the federal government should do it. You should know who is among you. You should know what kind of people you are infiltrating into your system. You should know. The word of God tells you, know those that labor among you. Though he was talking to Christians, let's look at it in the natural. Do you know those that labor among you? Do you know those that you're walking up and down the street with? You can get some kind of idea. And if you don't know it, your government should have. And 9 times out of 10, they know. They know. But are they protecting the people? Government's supposed to be our defense. They are supposed to be protecting the people. That's what we pay them for. That is exactly what we pay them for. That's what we pay them for. We're supposed to be loving our enemies. God people are commanded to go beyond caring for friends and to actively do good, to pray for, and even feed their enemies. Not the government. That's what we're supposed to do. And guess what? You know we're not doing it. Many of us are out here hindering the government from doing what it is they're supposed to do to try to alleviate some of the burden off of the people and putting themselves in harm's way. Because the government, according to Romans 13, is not for the law abiders, but for the lawless. Although, I could do a teaching on how they're bringing lawlessness into this country. Somebody get arrested 50 million times, and I'm exaggerating. I repent, I'm exaggerating. But somebody who have a laundry list of offenses that they continue to let out into the community, they are creating lawlessness. They are not following the law. They are creating our government, state, local, federal, creating lawlessness. And let's not talk about how people change their names to get into this country when they have committed offenses in their country. Then the thing with that Ilhan Omar, that's not new. They're talking about that, but that's not new. Because if you know the history of Great Britain and those kings and queens that came in there, you will see that's not new. And because they put things in books and documentaries that we don't go and look at or listen to, because we like staying ignorant, we like our darkness. We don't know that there are people in high places that does things like that changes their names so they won't be associated with the heinous things that they have done, and go to new lands and set up things where they do heinous things. All you have to do is do your research, people. Do your research. Do your research. But we listen to everything the government says. We listen to Project Mockingbird. We listen to, they parrot it in the news. They parrot it. And just like anything else, you hear something over and over again, and eventually you're going to believe the lie. Don't mean that it's true, but eventually you're going to believe that it is true because you keep hearing it over and over again. My next video is going to be about this no more kings thing. This is just not a natural thing. This is a spiritual thing. Because we know there is only one king. And he is the King of kings. And he is the Lord of lords. And his name is Jesus. So if we beginning to push this narrative of no kings, it's going to spill over. And I'm going to tell you about it in my next video. So stay tuned. We're going to be talking about no kings. Y'all have a good day.